The most desired watch by Rolex, the Daytona, is interestingly not the oldest watch in the Rolex catalog. While Rolex have been producing sports watches since 1930s, it wasn't until 1955 that Rolex introduced a manual wind chronograph watch in an oyster case. This was even after Rolex Submariner, GMT and Explorer were already in the production. What's even more interesting is that this first chronograph watch in oyster case wasn't called as Daytona. In fact, it wasn't until another 10 years when the first Rolex chronograph had the name Daytona printed on the dial. Before this time, and from 1963, this line was simply known as Cosmograph, a name that still remains printed on Rolex Daytona, produced even today. Another interesting historical attribute with Daytona is that when the first time the name Daytona appeared on the dial, it was printed right under the word Cosmograph. This was later changed in 1967 when the word Daytona moved to the top of 6 o'clock subdial, and it has maintained its placement and position on the dial ever since. If you're wondering where did the name Daytona come from, it was the name of Florida City, where in 1936 the first stock car race was held on the Daytona Beach Road course. In this video, we are looking at white dial reference, which is often nicknamed as Panda dial. With Daytona, what's on offer is the iconic looks and characters that can be spotted from 10 meters away. The contrasting white and black colors in the dial not only make the watch look interesting, but also the legibility for time reading is arguably one of the best to experience. The subdials and their hands are relatively small, and while to me personally, their legibility is also fine, it can be hard to read at times, especially in darker ambience or if the light on the dial is not right. And there's a reason to that, which I will discuss shortly. While the Daytona doesn't come with typical Mercedes hands, the hands in the dial can easily look to be very similar to the ones used in Datejust, OP or even Sky Dweller. But if you notice closely, these are unique dial hands for hour and minute for a Rolex sports watch. Where DJ and Sky Dweller have dial hands with 2 facets, here we have 3 facets on the hands, and I personally love the character and sporty looks that hands add to the watch. The hour markers are very unique to Daytona as well, and they not only allow perfect legibility, they are indeed beautiful, and their pointed edges towards the dial center complement the sporty characters of the watch just perfectly. While both the hour and minute hand and then also the hour markers are fully lumed, there is no lume in the subdials or their hands, meaning that under darker ambience or challenging light conditions, reading the subdials can easily become tricky. But since the dial hands are all white gold, in this particular white dial configuration, they always provide enough contrast against white background to remain visible. This is slightly different in black dial reference, where the darker background of the dial provides relatively less contrast to the subdial hands, and the legibility can be slightly harder. While Rolex specified Daytona as 40mm watch, if you ever held it in your hand or put it on your wrist and you were wondering that it didn't quite look like a 40mm watch, there's a reason to that too. While Rolex website called Daytona as 40mm watch, measured at the outer extremity of the bezel, it is only 38.4mm watch. This is relatively normal for Rolex to size smaller than their marketed size, as the OP41 that's marketed as 41mm watch is also only 39.5mm when measured at the case diagonally. The size of dial on Daytona is however the same as you get on 40mm or 41mm Submariner. That is, the size of crystal on top is 29.9mm. While many would argue that it is a 40mm size due to its chrono pushers that add further heft to the watch, I personally don't agree with that opinion, because Rolex Submariner also has substantial crown guards, but they are not included in its marketed size of 41mm either. While in the watch world, Let's admit, among some of the desired characters, we like to see symmetry and balance of components in the watch. And since we don't have a date in the dial on Daytona, the expectation for symmetry here naturally stays very high. And although the dial is very symmetrical, but unfortunately things don't quite look the same for the case. I'm not referring to the crown or pushers on one side of the case, rather the lugs of the watch on either side. If you look closely, the case lugs on the crown side are noticeably thinner than the ones on the other side, which is something I never expected or noticed until I held it in my hands. To put it into another perspective, let's put the watch upside down. And you can see now that the lugs on both sides of the case are not symmetrical or balanced in their width. The crown side lugs are much thinner along their length compared to the non-crown side ones. While many would again consider this as an attribute to balance out the case due to additional chunkiness from the crown and pushers, it's not the only chronograph watch with pushers, but possibly it is the only chronograph watch with uneven lugs. I personally don't consider it as a character or uniqueness, rather a strange design that is anything but aesthetically pleasing. While the watch is all steel, the bezel is made of ceramic material, and this was the first Daytona in steel to be offered with ceramic bezel. While ceramic bezel adds a contrast to the looks due to its black color, it also complements the color combination with this panda configuration perfectly. And on top of that, it adds daily beating characters to the watch, so you can wear it for everyday use without having to worry about scratching or dinging it. But if you drop the watch from height, it will likely shatter the bezel like a glass. The watch case comes fully polished and there is no brushed surface neither on the case nor on the lugs. While the case sides have rounded and curved profiles, the edges of the lugs are relatively sharp, and that adds sporty and aggressive looks to the watch. The watch case thickness is 12.25mm, and it's easily a very wearable watch and feels overall thin on the wrist thanks to its case profile that contours to the wrist just beautifully. While it naturally comes with pushers to activate the chronos, to maintain 100 meters of water resistance, the pushers are screwed in. I personally find it very inconvenient to be unscrewing the pushers before you can use them, to the point that many times I think you would simply prefer to avoid using them due to the lengthy procedure required to activate and deactivate them. Also, since this is a relatively new release, not having non-screwed in pushers in it is a bit of letdown, at least to me personally. Under the macro, the hour comes with fine details and there's no scratches, marks or even dust on side, which is truly impressive. The minute hand makes no difference and there's simply no flaw or even speck on side. The seconds hand also comes with fine finish and there's no smudge marks and no issues to be seen. Also, the corners and edges are also very sharp here with no burrs or high spot. The small seconds hand also makes no difference, and what's on offer is attention to detail. The other chrono hand maintains consistent finish, and while you can see some surface imperfections under the macro, you really can't spot them with naked eye, and I personally don't consider this of serious or concerning nature. Similar is the case with the minute hand for chrono, and the surface finish is consistent with what we saw on the other hand. The hour markers on Daytona are although simple with rounded edges, the surface treatment, polish and finish here does appear to be superior than what I've seen in Submariner or GMT, and there's no quality issues to be seen whatsoever. The text is very crisp, and unlike splash paint marks I showed on my video for OP31 as per link above, there's not even a dot that's out of order on side. The dial comes with very interesting surface finish where it has a plain white texture and neither it reflects the light nor it has rough surface to absorb it. Rather, it offers smooth surface yet no reflections, which has a vibe of its own. Putting the watch in the dark, there's not just a lume, there's rather a very beautiful and bright lume. The lume is very symmetrical, but as I mentioned before, there's no lume in the subdials or its hands, so it is rather a two-hander watch in the dark. I left the watch in the dark for another 10 minutes, and the watch not just maintained the lume brightness, rather the lume is also very consistent, and this is very typical of Rolex, being truly reliable watches. On the wrist, the 40mm Daytona, or should I say the 38.4mm Daytona, wears on the wrist where it's neither a small watch nor of course a large watch. My wrist size is 6.5 inches and wristband is 55mm. And while the watch case size is 38.4mm, the lug-to-lug height of the watch is 46.37mm. So while the face of the watch is small, it doesn't really wear very small. But due to its thinner lugs, or should I say its uneven lugs, it does look relatively a smaller watch. I'm personally used to wearing Submariner, and I can tell you that this Daytona is considerably smaller than Submariner 6-digit, and you do feel it on the wrist, even when it's not side by side with Submariner. Due to smaller size and overall heftiness, it is also lighter in weight, and adjusted to 6.5 inches wrist, it weighs only 133 grams, as opposed to Sub, which is 149 grams adjusted to same bracelet length. To summarize, it doesn't fill your wrist like a 40mm watch, but then due to taller lug-to-lug height, it doesn't look small like a typical 38.5mm watch, which probably is the reason why it is so versatile. But if you prefer bigger watches with wrist presence, you will likely find it small. Although it is a professional sports watch, it does come with blingy characters, and we have shiny ceramic bezel and then the case that is fully polished. The bracelet also complements the shiny attributes and comes with polished center links and brushed side links. The watch comes with Oyster safety clasp to prevent accidental release, but there is no glide lock extension like a Submariner. However, there is 5mm extension link and micro adjustments on the go. Rolex Daytona is arguably one of the most hyped and iconic watches of all times. Originally designed and produced for racing, it has improved and evolved into a product where it is a steel and professional watch at heart, yet it offers the experience and joy of luxury. Even at its retail price, it's not a cheap watch, and it by no means has remained a watch that you will buy to wear only to time the sports or a race. It has rather evolved into a watch that you would buy and enjoy as life's milestone or at winning the race. And Rolex have put in the effort and attention to detail to make it what it is today. While Daytona carries with it a long history that makes it an icon, like any other watch, it is not a perfect watch. The case is not symmetrical. The case size is shorter than its advertised size. The legibility in the dark can be challenging. But then again, if you talk about the characters of iconic looks, durability, tolerance to day-to-day beating, accuracy, and then versatility to make it work with just any occasion or dress, you'd be pushed to beat a Daytona.